Hit the button.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome to another MLB Live Before Lock, and we're going to have to deal with probably my least favorite thing to deal with in any DFS slate ever. Well, second least favorite thing. My least favorite thing is MMA fights that get canceled after lock or NBA DFS late scratches that happen after a game lock. But close behind that, in terms of my least favorite thing, is dealing with weather in MLB DFS. And we've got a massive weather spot in Chicago today for Eric and I to break down as we go through here. The thing we were going to ask of you, the only thing at all while you watch this show, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do that for us. It helps us out a whole bunch. We're sponsored today by Better. If you guys do want to sign up at Better, use the promo code Stochastic1. Get a deposit bonus of up to $250 when you sign up at Better. Eric, what's happening today?
Not much. Just ready to rock. Same headache that you have. I put Suzuki on a home run play already, which was a little bit frustrating. Pulled the trigger on that this like early morning, and then refreshed the weather. Everything has looked awful all day. It's all I've thought about for about 6 hours.
So let's start with the weather spot, because there's so many things that are at play here. Most notably, the Cubs offense is right towards the top of our top stacks. So you got the Coors Field game, you got the Chicago game. It's a game where we've got a couple of things going. We've got Imanaga, who's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's expected to be on the mound for the Cubs in a good matchup against the White Sox. But then also the Cubs going up against Chris Flexen look like one of the best offenses on the slate. But then you got a game that, I don't know, at best is 50-50 to play today. So how are you going to handle it in large field tournaments?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I think it's going to just depend on where the ownership drops. This will be something we're just paying attention to all the way up to lock. Imanaga has the highest top 2 percentage out of any pitcher. The Cubs have the second highest top stack behind Cincinnati, I guess sandwiched between Cincinnati and Colorado up in Coors. And it is an offense that is plummeting in terms of the ownership share. It's also just set up for home runs. You don't get north of 6 implied totals with this kind of ownership ever in MLB DFS. And I don't know what I'm going to do yet. It's just going to depend on what happens with weather between now and lock of that game. And I'm just going to have to react to wherever the ownership ends up. Again, I guess the right way of saying this is I'm willing to embrace risk when it comes to stuff like this. And if you're risk averse, this is a slate where, you know, there's parts of that you want to tread lightly with. I know in the past people have talked about, oh, I don't want to play one-offs. I don't want to play whatever else there. You're going to have a problem with whatever you have from this game getting zeros in your lineups. It's going to be very difficult to win tournaments on a 10-game slate with zeros up and down your lineup, or 2 of them from this game. So for me, I am just going to be paying attention to the weather just like everybody else. If you jump into the MLB Discord over at Stochastic, I'm going to be jumping in, giving you an update on what I'm going to do, but I don't know what it's going to be yet. Greg, do you?
So I don't. Here's one thing that is kind of nice about this slate. This game, the Chicago game, meaning, locks at 8:05 Eastern time. We only have 3 games that are locking around 7. We've got the Minnesota Yankees game that locks at 7:05 Eastern time. We've got Baltimore-Toronto that locks at 7:07. We've got Atlanta-Boston, which locks at 7:10. As of right now, my best guess is the game does not play. I don't think that I think the most likely scenario, Cubs, White Sox postponed, doesn't end up getting played. But the good news is that for now, I'm going to leave my lineups with this game in my player pool. And then should we end up finding out if the game gets delayed, it is not going to play. I feel very strongly about that.
I agree with that.
An announcement that the game is going to be delayed, because the weather only gets worse there as the night goes on. So what I think they're going to try to do is play the game and just get as much of it in as possible if weather permits. But Since the game locks at 8:05 Eastern time, I'm going to leave it in my player pool for now. I'm going to wait right up until like 7:50 or so, and then I'm going to make a decision, run my stuff through the late swap tool if I decide I want to just pull the plug and take everybody out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I plan on doing. For me, it was more of like, do you know what you're doing? I don't. And to say that I do doesn't really make sense. It's going to really depend on where I think the field is. I mean, I'm going to have Twitter open. I'm going to have the top stacks tool open. I'm going to have, the top pitchers tool open. I'm going to be having the Sims open. I'm just going to be refreshing and trying to figure out where ownership is going to land on stuff like that, because the lower it dips, the more I'll risk it if that game starts. I don't know what the answer is going to be, though, leading into it. There's no doubt you have a very prominent offense at the top of this one. The team I was highest on yesterday, Cincinnati, they're going to be extra chalky this time around, going up against Ty Block. But Frankie Montas, Colorado, that entire game is probably going to eat up 24-25% of ownership in people's lineups as it is. So yeah, if I could slice out some Cubs, that would be awesome. It would make me feel much, much better about my day, knowing that I was overweight to that spot if it plays. But I'm with you. If it late starts, I will take it completely out.
Yeah, well, if it changes your opinion at all, Dale in chat, and we all know about Dale. Dale has said it's going to play.
Thanks, Dale. Is that Dale from accounting? Cool.
That is, I think it's Dale. I think it's Dale from the internet.
Oh, okay. From the interwebs. Yeah.
Dale from the internet. It is Dale. Dale Crispin says there's no rain in the forecast.
That is
all right.
The silliest thing that I have ever heard, because otherwise Apple is lying to us, Google is lying to us, and it's the end times, which I guess is maybe debatable. But anyway, we're going to be paying attention to weather throughout this program.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not definitively saying it will or will not play. My best guess is that it won't play. But just a guess. I think to say that it's 100% going to play or 100% not going to play, I think that's a little bit silly of a proclamation to make. So we'll find out as we go here. And then also, if you guys are a Stochastic sub and you're in the Discord channel, we're going to be keeping everybody apprised of all the news as we go throughout the night. And right off the bat here, we've got a super chat. It is a betting related question from Nick the Picker. The reason he is leaving this super chat for us is because he tried to call me right at the start of the show. And I texted him. I said, hey, man, starting a show right now. Can't pick up the call. So what we're going to do is the typical phone conversation I have over the course of the day with Nick. It is going to have to come on to MLB Live Before Lock, where he says, Gregory, that's my name, my full legal name, Gregory Spencer Ehrenberg. Gregory, the Yankees are destroying righties recently. Bailey Ober is trash. You could get the first 5 team total for over 2.5 runs at plus 124. And then Bailey Ober's outs are set at 15.5. Earned runs allowed at 2.5. Seems too good to be true. What am I missing? Eric, what do you make of the New York Yankees today in a spot against Bailey Ober? You historically have been kind of low on Bailey Ober, even as a Minnesota Twins fan.
Yeah, he's overrated. I've always felt that way. Same way I felt about Jose Barrios. I mean, you got to just kind of look at the numbers of what you see. And it's not that the Yankees have just been good recently against Bailey Ober. They've been good all year long, 130 WRC plus against. That is a pretty decent mark, Nick. So you're looking at the right stuff there for sure. I'm always here to attack Bailey Ober. 443 expected slugging is on the higher end. An 11.3% barrel percentage is way up there on the season. So Soto, Judge, you have Verdugo now batting 4th as well, trying to get another lefty up there. I am very much here for it. Anthony Rizzo even, I think, is pretty interesting for some of his props. I know that Mr. Josh Engelman there in the chat had him as the early morning. He actually beat me to the early morning play. I was up earlier here taking my dog on a walk, so he ended up getting that Anthony Rizzo play in before I got it in at like 6 a.m. my time, but I like everybody on the Yankees for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got actually some good puns in the chat. We got Max Video 35 says the game is going to hit the Ober, and then Citizen X47 says I think he's a little overrated. So yeah, when it comes to Bailey Ober, he has pitched better this year, but the Yankees offense is definitely no easy tasks to be handling. The Yankees offense has been tremendous this year. Aaron Judge has probably been the best player in baseball over the course of the last month, where if it was not for a really poor first few weeks of the season for Aaron Judge, he would be an overwhelming favorite to win the American League MVP right now, because he's been insanely good over the course of the last couple months or last few weeks. I don't know if he started the season with an injury we didn't hear about or something like that, but this is not the same player now as it was earlier. Nick, I'm going to say go ahead and take those Yankees overs. Feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Seems like you're on the same page, Eric.
Yeah, it didn't go over my head. It was good. It's good.
Let's see. Oh, by the way, I want to follow up because I believe Dale had a question for us in chat. He wanted to know, I think, the game between the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Cubs. Is it being played in Wisconsin? It is being played in Chicago. The game between the White Sox and the Cubs. So something to note there about that game. Let's start talking about the pitching. And if you guys are a Stochastic sub and have any questions for us, hit me up in the Discord channel so that we could start going and answering these. And right off the bat, we do have a question from Hey, I'm Drew 95. He wants to know, who are the two pitchers that he should be rostering in a DraftKings cash game today? So for cash games, Eric,
Easy.
This is where, by the way, cash games don't touch the Chicago game in cash games. Fair to say that, correct?
Correct.
And I know that could be scary because if the game plays, there's clearly a lot of upside, but we care more about the floor in cash games than we care about the ceiling. So which two pitchers do you think Hey, I'm Drew should be playing in cash games? The easiest player to take out of the equation is Imanaga.
Yeah, so I think the Heel Arrighetti combination is actually decent enough, but there's a case to be made for Flaherty Kirby as well. As I'm looking across everywhere, you just kind of want to play the two more popular guys up there. I think Flaherty and Kirby with 10-8 on Luis Heel. I know he's playing the most ownership. I love this kid. I've been rostering him a crazy amount since day one this season. I feel like there hasn't been a show that Greg and I have done where I haven't talked about Luis Heel, even out of context, I suppose. But still, I think Jack Flaherty and Kirby are the better cash game options. I know he's a little bit more popular there. I'm just kind of looking at some of the value bats. I'm not playing cash. I'm looking across at some of these guys. I'm running my top projected here and taking a look. And it is going to be Flaherty and Kirby. I was correct.
By the way, I knew people were going to be able to hear it, Jordan. Rock Doggy in chat is saying, who is a drone flying around in their room? There is a ton of construction going on outside my house. I could barely hear anything Eric is saying, but blame my neighbors because the people across the street are, I don't even understand. They're getting their driveway paved, but in a way where it involves just taking their entire existing driveway out and making a massive hole in the ground. So that's what it is that you're hearing, is the people across the street doing construction. It has been going on for the last 6 months or so, starting at like 7 a.m. and goes until like 10, 11 o'clock at night every single day. It's been super annoying. So that's what it is that you guys are hearing.
At least you're not complaining about it.
And talk about some of the other, by the way, for me, cash game pitchers, I'm going to say Luis Heel and Jack Flaherty. I think it's the most, actually, I'm going to say Luis Heel and George Kirby, just because Kirby's got the matchup against the Oakland A's. So Heel, Kirby, and you don't have to worry about stacking in cash games. So it's easier to find value. Should be easy to pay up for pitching. Go to Luis Heel and George Kirby in cash games. I do think there's a case to be made for Spencer Arrighetti to save salary, but I just don't think it's necessary for cash games. I'd rather spend down with bats than at pitcher. Arrighetti, to me, more somebody who I'm interested in GPPs, which we are going to be getting to in a second here, but pay up options for the slate, Eric. Let's talk about all the guys who are 9K and above. Luis Heel, 28% owned. Imanaga's 19% owned. We got Corbin Burns, 9% owned. Jack Flaherty, 26% owned. Max Fried, 21% owned. This is the ownership on all the pitchers who are 9K and above. So pretty much all of these guys picking up some decent semblance of ownership outside of Corbin Burns. I want to ask you, though, if you're only rostering one spend-up pitcher, who is the guy that you're gravitating towards in tournaments? If you could only pick one of these guys.
You know who it is already. Don't kid yourself. It's Luis Heel. I love this kid. 31.7% K rate, sub 30% hard hit. Gets the matchup against my Minnesota Twins. It's 23.6% K rate against righties, rated 100 WRC plus. And I think one of the things that you always have to keep in context is, well, Byron Buxton is back in our lives. And Byron Buxton was out there for almost a month, it was. And that was a long duration to not have a guy with a north of 30% K rate routinely in your lineup. He's batting 7th today, had been 5th, but with Royce Lewis coming back, that is definitely a right demotion, if you will. Everything about Luis Heel looks fantastic to me. Not that I won't have a couple of Twins going up against him. Obviously, he's the most popular pitcher on the slate, but he's got a 26% top 2 percentage. He's got nearly 30% ownership, but I still don't think it's enough. I've got him in 38% of my lineups.
One other thing I want to ask about the spend up options is how are you going to handle Imanaga relative to the game as a whole? Because I do think there's a lot more risk with the pitchers, and we don't give a shit
Yep.
about Chris Flex, and we're not considering Chris Flexen as somebody to roster. But there's clearly more risk with the starting pitchers in the offenses because there's a scenario where the game goes into a rain delay, they have to pause it and restart it, and the pitchers don't end up coming back. So what are you going to do with the pitchers, well, really just Imanaga, relative to the offense? Because I do think it's a different discussion when we talk about Imanaga.
So Imanaga is fine. I don't really like him at 18% ownership, even if this game were being played clean at the moment. 167 ISO, expected ISO against lefties, 137. He's been decent enough on the platoon there against righties, but we haven't seen him pitch in summer. He got some really good draws at home early in the season, and I don't think that gets enough consideration. We're talking about relatively small sample size. He opened in Colorado, wind blowing in. Had the Dodgers, wind blowing in, though, pretty severely for that one. Then goes to Seattle, then gets the wind blowing in Miami, or at home against Miami. Then goes on the road to Boston. Wind was blowing in, 58 degrees at first pitch. And it's just been a really good run out for matchups for Shota Imanaga. And I know that this is yet another one, but with the wind blowing out, we haven't seen a situation where he's really been, quote unquote, tested with elements. I mean, he goes into Milwaukee, gets lit up last time out. I was kind of waiting for that. And of course, I had Imanaga on that slate, so it just sucked all the way around anyway. But Shota Imanaga is somebody that I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop in some spots. Not that there's anything wrong with him by any means, but at 18, 20% ownership pulling already here, I've had enough concerns about him and some of the really good matchups he's had to start off his season that I was waiting for a spot like this. Wind blowing out, a weak team, and then I would get to some White Sox. And if this game does play, I promise you I will have some White Sox stacks. There's no doubt in my mind that I will do that, but not anything considerable by any means. He's been awesome, Imanaga has, so he's okay if you want to be rostering him there, but right now he's completely out of my player pool.
Yeah, so somebody in playback brought this up. Shout out to D's Nuts who brought it up in playback because since it seems that my mic is picking up noise through playback but not through YouTube, when you're talking, I'll just mute myself over in playback, and that should eliminate some of those issues. But yeah, Imanaga, I am right now, while I'm playing a good amount of the Cubs offense, I'm just going to take Imanaga out of my player pool. A little bit too much risk there for me, especially when I think a lot of these guys at the top end are pretty comparable to be getting to. So I do feel differently about Imanaga than I do right now relative to the Cubs offense. But for me, with that in mind, let's see, what do I have?
This is kind of hilarious because I know you can't hear me, but you get done, I get done saying something, and then you've said the identical thing to me back-to-back times about the cash game pitchers, about Imanaga. Like, I don't have any interest in playing Imanaga today.
Yeah, I was agreeing with you also though. Like I did hear generally what you said about Imanaga. Right, so good. on the same page there. And I mean, also related, and then I already knew this was going to be your answer anyway, but I do think Luis Gil is the best overall spend up pitcher to be getting to on this slate. He has been insanely good. I do have bets on him to win Rookie of the Year. I am a little bit concerned about, because people have asked me about his Cy Young candidacy. That does make me a little bit more nervous because everything we've heard from beat reporters that the Yankees do want to limit Gil's innings this year. So I do think later on in the season, he seems pretty live to either move to the bullpen or they just skip some of his starts, which is probably going to make it difficult for him to win the Cy Young. But just for today, for DFS, he's pretty clearly my overall favorite spend-up pitcher. His numbers are just outrageously good this year, and his stuff is insane. 1.99 ERA, 2.75 expected ERA, 2.98 FIP. His strikeout rate is 32%. So everything here looks really good for Luis Gil. It is a little bit insane that he's the favorite to win Rookie of the Year, or that he's eligible to win Rookie of the Year, I should say, considering that he first made his Major League debut in 2021. But since he didn't exhaust his rookies limit, he's been pitching at the big league level. It's like his fourth season or something like that, but still eligible for Rookie of the Year. But yeah, he's my favorite spend up option on the slate. Any of the other high price pitchers that you're prioritizing?
Prioritizing, are we talking, can we throw Flaherty in there? Is that 9,200? Is that still spending up, or are we talking Corbin Burns only?
Yeah, the pitchers that I gave you is everybody 9K enough. So Fried,
9K now.
Flaherty, Burns, Imanaga, Heel, those five.
Yeah, so I like Max Fried. I like Jack Flaherty. I think this is a pitching slate where I've been pretty flat. Besides Luis Heel, who I'm over the field on 38%, pretty sizable stand up against my Twins there. But Flaherty and Fried are both awesome options. I mean, I know in Texas is a decent enough lineup, and you have those concerns. But Max Fried in Boston, this is like a sneaky good spot, I would say. I guess the field is getting there, so it's not as sneaky as I was hoping it would be. But if you look at K rate against lefties on the season, Boston is number 1 in baseball. I think that's pretty surprising. 28.4% K rate. It was something that kind of stood out to me this morning. I was like, oh, I'm getting to 24, 26% max free. Why is that? Well, that would be why. Now, you have to look at the individual lineup because teams start making adjustments for such things. But this specific lineup, I don't have a ton of issues with Max Fried. You get Jamie Westbrook in there batting 5th, who I've never heard of in my entire lifetime. Bobby Dahlbeck, we know he is an absolute K machine. So there's a really nice opportunity with those two bats in particular to potentially see a boost to that strikeout profile. Garrett Cooper's been nearly 30% on the season as well, 28.3%. It's a sneaky good spot for Max Fried.
One other so my guys are Luis Heel and Jack Flaherty on the high end, which also seems generally year two. Like the two, it seems you have the most exposure to are Heel and Flaherty, correct?
Correct.
All right. So Jack Flaherty, his ERA won't wow you this year, 3.46. His underlying numbers, super, super strong, though. 2.53 expected ERA, 2.78 FIP. His fastball velocity is also up at 94 miles per hour. First time we've seen that from him in a few years now, since he was last healthy in 2021. So there was a couple of years where kind of weird stuff happened in St. Louis. He dealt with injuries. He also just seemed generally unhappy there. Like if you read any of the comments that he's had towards the media, he's like, I hated the fans in St. Louis. I hated the media. And it seemed to be something that not only impacted his performance, but also his overall effort level while he was pitching as a member of the Cardinals, which makes it really difficult to project him going forward because I don't know that the last 2 years of data really tell us anything because I don't think he was pitching to his full potential, partially due to just self-sabotage and him seemingly wanting to get out of St. Louis. But now I think we're getting back to the guy who was formerly a top pitching prospect. So the ERA, it's good, not great, like I'd said at 3.46, but the underlying numbers are so strong. He's got a 3.8% walk rate. That is by far the best mark of his career. He's got a 34% strike rate. That is also by far the best mark of his career. So lots of positive signs for Jack Flaherty. Those are the two guys I want to be spending up for, Flaherty as well as Luis Heel. In the next price range of pitchers, Eric, talking about the 8K guys, we've only got one that's picking up ownership. George Kirby is 25% owned against the Oakland A's on the road. We got Cutter Crawford against the Braves, Kyle Harrison against the Diamondbacks, Bailey Ober against the Yankees. So none of Crawford, Harrison, or Ober are really picking up any ownership, whereas George Kirby is 25% owned. What are you going to be doing with a chalk guy in George Kirby when considering we've already identified some other pay up options we like? He's a little bit cheaper, but do you like him as much as the field does?
No, and I've never liked George Kirby as much as the field. I think that's a guy for 2 years where I'm like, all right, he's getting by on being extremely accurate. He is he has a strike thrower, if you will. 2.2% walk rate is absurd. 436 expected slugging, starting to sneak up there. Does have the 23.3% K rate, and it's undeniable. I know that we've seen Oakland have improvements to their lineup. 99 WRC plus. I feel like we should all applaud for them for actually being functional and like average for the first time in a while. But 26.5% K rate, third highest in baseball against righties. And George Kirby, we've seen some decent strikeout stuff from him. It's up a tick from last season. So as I look through George Kirby stuff, the fastball velocity is down 0.5 mile per hour, but overall, there's nothing all that concerning for me. He just feels like the same guy. 3.56 expected ERA. He's been getting a little bit unlucky in that department, but it's Oakland. It's a great strikeout matchup. It's a great ballpark, and he's had a little bit of a home run problem. Like maybe I'm incorrect about. Let me double check my stuff here because I thought he had like 7 home runs allowed in the month of May already. Yeah, that is correct. There we are. 7 home runs allowed in 6 games this month. So there's a little bit of a home run issue that helps out pitching in Oakland.
So I like George Kirby for cash games. We talked about before. I think he's very safe. George Kirby is. but I'm not sure he has the same ceiling of these other pitchers that we've talked about. 23.3% strikeout rate, numbers for the year: 4.08 ERA, 3.34 FIP, 3.56 xFIP. Very, very solid, but not great starting pitcher in George Kirby. And the issue I have with him in tournaments is I get to some exposure to him, just less than what the field has, because I do think these other pitchers priced around him bring more upside to the table. So I'll have some lineups with him, not as much as the field. I prefer my pitching exposure to either be spending up or getting a little bit cheaper. So if we start talking about some of these cheap pitchers, Eric, let's talk about everybody that's priced below 8K. We'll group all of these guys together. There's only two picking up ownership. Dane Dunning is 20% owned against the Detroit Tigers. Spencer Arrighetti is 21% owned against the Cardinals. Nobody else is more than 5% owned that's sub 8K. So before we start talking about the FanDuel pitchers, and a lot of these guys don't really matter as much for FanDuel, if you're looking to save salary for a pitcher on DraftKings in a tournament, do you go to Dunning? Do you go to Arrighetti? Or is there a different pitcher that's not picking up ownership that you're liking?
It's Arrighetti that I like the most. And Sean V, you're going to kill me, dude. I just got done talking about short sample size. I just got done talking about it. He's had 6 games on the road. Look who he's played on the road, George Kirby. I'm defending a guy that I don't even like that much. He was on the road in Toronto, in Colorado, in Houston, in Minnesota, in Baltimore, in Washington. Those are not ideal places to be pitching. He is pitching in Oakland tonight against a team that strikes out a lot. So George Kirby, I don't like his ceiling as much. I'm with Greg there. I'm going to get to around 20%, but like, you can't just say, oh, he's got huge home run splits and have that be the say all and end all to everything that you throw into analysis. Good God Almighty. May God have mercy on your soul. But I like Arrighetti the most.
I agree with Sean. But that aside, I if we look at the cheap pitchers on the slate, so it is for sure for me, Arrighetti, the guy to get to over Dane Dunning. There is a good amount of upside in Spencer Arrighetti. The downside with him is that he is not particularly good. But what's nice is he's always cheap and he always generates strikeouts as well. So you got a pitcher here in Arrighetti, 25.5% K rate. His strikeout numbers throughout the minor leagues were generally in like the high 20, low 30% mark. So you got a team also in the Cardinals who it's a right-hand dominant lineup. A lot of their top hitters, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, better against lefties than they are against righties for their career. So it's not a terrible matchup for Arrighetti. It's a slightly positive one. He's not good enough to where I feel confident enough to recommend him for a cash games or anything like that. I mean, he's got an ERA close to 6 when it comes to Arrighetti. He also is not a ranked prospect. He wasn't a great pitcher in the minor leagues, but the strikeout upside for a pitcher is $6,700. This is what I like to look for in tournaments. So as far as a cheap punt goes, I like Arrighetti. Dane Dunning is okay, but Arrighetti is certainly my preference. Are there any other cheap pitchers that are not getting ownership that you think could differentiate a lineup in tournaments?
Cutter Crawford. I'm going to play Cutter Crawford. I don't want to talk about it.
You said I'm going to play Cutter.
By
By the way, also shout out to D's Nuts, who said, because before he had recommended, hey, if I mute myself when you're talking, we don't have to worry about the drones flying overhead, those vehicles across the street that are doing all the construction. But he has a follow-up point. He says, Greg, can you also ask Eric to mute himself when he's talking? And then that would really shore up the show here, according to D's Nuts. But tell us anyway, what makes you not want to talk
in control? I feel like Animal on the Muppets. In control. Just trying to relax. I'm going to play a little bit of Cutter Crawford. Look, I'm not saying you should. He's got a 4.19 xFIP, but Cutter Crawford has decent enough strikeout stuff, 23.1%. And when I talked about a sneaky good matchup for Max Fried, it's kind of a sneaky good matchup for Cutter Crawford in terms of strikeout stuff, 23.6% against righties on the season. Atlanta, that's just a little bit above average. And just a 103 WRC plus. And you can say what you want about Ronald Acuna's start to the season. Anybody that they put in to replace him, because now you've got, Kelnick playing every single day, even against lefties at times. There are just times where you're going to look at the lineup and say, oh, there's no Ronald Acuna in it. It's going to project out a lot worse. So I don't know what to say other than, Michael Harris, Adam Duvall, Jared Kelnick, not exactly a bad outfield whatsoever, but 103 WRC plus. We've seen issues overall relative to like expectations for Matt Olson, for Austin Riley. I think they're going to be both just fine. But Cutter Crawford, I'm going to take a couple of shots on it. Just like what? Very, very insanely low ownership. What do we have him at right now? 5.2%. If that holds true, I'm going to get to a little bit there. I think Mitch Spence too. You got to take some shots against Seattle, don't you? Like every single time out with any right-handed pitcher on planet Earth.
So he was going to be the guy that I was going to talk about here. Not somebody who I have like a crazy amount of, but he's projected for 5% ownership. He's in 10% of my lineups. He's the only pitcher that I've double-digit exposure to that's a punt option that isn't Arrighetti or Dane Dunning. So the 10% ownership that I have on Spence, it's mostly just because, number one, he's extremely cheap. Number two, he's pitching, well, 3 points. Cheap, no ownership, and he's pitching against the Mariners. And it's a good ballpark as well. Like all those things being added together, it makes him somebody who it's like, hey, can this guy score like 13 to 15 fantasy points? And if Coors Field goes off and maybe we need some salary savings, yeah, I can see where he's viable in that scenario.
Yep, totally with you. I think you just blindly do it until Seattle proves otherwise. I mean, we saw Arrighetti, Verlander, everybody come in and mow down Seattle. I think anytime Seattle faces a righty from now until the end of the season, we'll be asking ourselves, should we roster them? And the answer is probably yes, if they're cheap.
Anything else at all that you like a pitcher that we have not talked about? And the answer can certainly be no, and that's fine.
Yeah, like is probably not correct. I have 1% Bailey Ober. That's cool. I have a couple of shares of Kyle Harrison against San Francisco. Kyle Harrison against Arizona. I don't love it, but just kind of another punt. Somebody that I'm still frustrated with this guy that we never really saw any kind of strikeout stuff show up from him. He's 8,100. Nobody wants to play him. He gave up 12 hits last time out. Totally understand why they don't, but in the interest of getting different, it is a 10-game slate. We've had like 12, 14-game slates on Tuesdays. More limited. I think you can mix and match a couple of these guys, but again, just like 1, 2, 3% of some of these dudes mixed and matched with 38% Heel, 28% Jack Flaherty, getting to a little bit of all of this mid-range 9K guys that everybody else is too. And then I guess the big stand is just full fade of Imanaga right now.
Yeah, and a little bit of a weather update here. We now have what looks like close to a 50% chance of rain starting about an hour into that Chicago versus Chicago game, which, as we identified before, where is the game taking place between the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Cubs? None other than in Chicago. So we've got this game here. It looks, you're looking at a 50% chance for rain to start right in the middle of that game. So that's where we're at right now. We don't have to make the decision right now. I'm leaving the game in my player pool, not playing Imanaga at the moment, but I am getting some exposure to not some exposure, a lot of exposure to the Chicago Cubs, and then a variable to change as we get closer to lock here. But I'm going to, as we get closer to that particular game locking, but I do plan on leaving that game in my player pool when we get to lock. And then if I make any changes, that'll be after the fact. But let's go ahead and go and look at our FanDuel pitchers to talk about here. And I'm going to refresh ownership to make sure nothing has changed. FanDuel side of things, Imanaga projected for 12% ownership on the high end. We got Luis Gil at 17% ownership. Corbin Burns is 10% owned on FanDuel. Jack Flaherty is 5% owned. Of all these pay-up options we have, and let's go all the guys who are 9K or higher. So George Kirby's also 8% owned. Max Fried is 5% owned. So on the high end, Luis Gil is 17% owned. On the low end, Max Fried is 5% owned. So nobody like crazy contrarian over on FanDuel. If you're paying up for one FanDuel pitcher for tournaments, who are you going towards? Is it Luis Gil or is it somewhere else? Because Gil is the most popular pitcher on FanDuel, and he's also 11K, which is quite expensive.
Playing one lineup on FanDuel, it has Luis Gil. So yeah, that's the guy for me. 7.5K prop everywhere. You're always just paying attention to the prop market, trying to make informed decisions. Oh, who's got the most strikeout upside? And then Luis Gil is pretty much everything else that's going along with it so far this season. The guy is insanely good. 3.46 xFIP isn't like out of this world, but 2.98 FIP, just no home runs allowed really. 40% ground ball rate isn't like ideal, but I mean, he's just given up such weak contact. I think the 187 BABIP is going to regress, but like just back to what I said before, 38% on DK of him and one lineup on FanDuel.
So a couple things to say about FanDuel. First off, I think there's no need to spend down at all. Just no need.
Correct.
The
Dane Dunning thing is wild, isn't it?
Dane Dunning is $8,300 on FanDuel, 12% owned. You got Arrighetti is 8,507% owned. I think it's different if these guys were like in the 6 or 7K range, like they are on DraftKings. I don't really want to play them at $85 or $8,300. And it's not that difficult to spend the couple 1,500, 1,000 extra dollars to get up to the other spend up options on the slate. So first, I only want to roster the expensive pitchers on FanDuel. Luis Heel, Jack Flaherty looks worse to me on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings just because he's less likely to pick up the win bonus and that holds more weight over on FanDuel. So the spots that I like looking at on FanDuel, also I think George Kirby looks better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, less popular relatively. And then also pitching against the Oakland A's where he's more likely to be getting like the win bonus and the quality start bonus. Like those are extra points that are going to matter more on FanDuel. So the pitchers I like the most on FanDuel, Luis Heel, George Kirby. Those are the two guys that I'm liking the most for FanDuel purposes. I like being able to get George Kirby at 7% owned against the Oakland A's. And I think he's relatively, there's always variance in baseball, but I do think that if you have to rank all the pitchers in terms of likelihood to get the quality start bonus, I think Kirby's probably the most likely.
Yeah, I guess the one bummer, just to go back to George Kirby for 1 second, something I looked at this morning, forgot to bring up with him. The guy has a 29.6% K rate against lefties, only a 16.8% K rate against righties. So Toro will be batting from the left side, useful. Blade, Brown, Soderstrom, like I still think like 4 tops. I don't know. It feels like lower on that. Yeah, it feels like I'm a little bit lower. I did bet his under for Ks already, so there's that. I do that a lot with George Kirby, but I am pretty confident that, yeah, 6 innings, I wouldn't go near like a 17.5 outs prop or anything there for him. I feel like he's pretty darn safe for FanDuel, and that's pretty low ownership.
We got Westbrook Forever in chat says, are the Cubs bats still good in cash games? I would argue they were never good in cash games. It's too much weather risk. If you're looking to build a cash game lineup right now, Cubs, it's a tournament team. If you did want to play him in a tournament situation, I wouldn't want to do it in cash games because you run into a risk where you got like a coin flip shot of your entire lineup being dead.
Yeah, the only guy I would even consider, well, I guess Ian Happ maybe at 3,900, but Christopher Morel 4,200. He's like plus 250 to hit a home run every damn day. Facing Flexen, like I think that would be the only guy you'd even consider, and I wouldn't consider him purely because of the weather.
We've got awesome guy 899 in chat said these guys just want to scare you off the Cubs. I'm playing the Cubs. I'm playing the Cubs right now. I'm letting people know that there is weather risk though. I can't sit here and tell people that there's a 0% chance it rains, right? I'm not Dale. I don't have that kind of weather confidence where I can just be like, no, there's no, you can look at the weather, go to weather.com, type in Chicago and just look at the weather report. There's a chance of rain in the forecast. That's just the reality of the situation. As of right now, it's a risk that I'm willing to take in my lineups, but I'm going to reassess it as we get closer to the game. But yeah, there's weather risk. That's just kind of how it goes.
So good. I love it here.
Anything else you want to add about pitchers at all? If not, we'll build some lineups in lineup generator.
Lineup generator. Let's go.
All right, guys. If you haven't done yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Jordan, pull up the lineup generator. We'll look at what kind of lineups we're getting to here. If you guys want to sign up for the lineup generator or any other package at Stochastic, sign up using the link that we have below in the YouTube description box. We've got links for all of our different products there. Any subscription you sign up for, it does come with access to our Discord channel. So you could ask questions throughout the day. You could ask questions on shows we could answer. And then also we got News God who's always dropping news updates and anything that's relevant. So like if we find out the Cubs game gets postponed or going to be delayed or whatever, that'll be updated in our Discord channel. And then also if you do sign up for a lineup generator package, it's less than $15. It builds lineups for you. It includes player projections and ownership projections. They're right in the lineup generator. So let's go ahead. We'll build some lineups here. Go build them for DraftKings to start. The usual deal, Jordan. I'll ask you, though, Eric. Do you want to do balanced, contrarian, or chalky lineups for tonight?
Contrarian, simply because if we go to chalky, we're just going to be clicking on cores over and over and over and over and over and over and over like it's Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, so let's see what we end up getting to. I am a little concerned that if we go contrarian, it'll give us nothing but Cubs. But we'll see. Yeah, that does seem to be the case. Because one of the things that is happening with the weather now, the ownership keeps coming down on Chicago. And I mean, we've just got the Sims are just jamming the Chicago Cubs for me at the moment. And yeah, you look at, I mean, even because we built the contrarian lineups, Imanaga showing up in a bunch of these. Horner, Morel, we've got what is it? Pete Crow Armstrong. He's showing up in lineups. Bellinger, Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, Miguel Amaya, Seiya Suzuki. Our most rostered hitters, it's just 1 through 9 in the Chicago lineup by making contrarian lineups, Eric.
I don't hate it, but also I'll hate it if an hour into this game thunderstorms start up. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then pitchers that we're getting to here. Imanaga at the top. Then there's Luis Heel, Spencer Arrighetti, Jack Flaherty. We've got Dane Dunning there. So a lot of the pitchers that we did talk about before are the pitchers that we're getting to here. Stack exposures. Yeah, this was the what I thought could potentially happen by building contrarian lineups. It is 80% exposure to the Chicago Cubs, and then we're getting some Rocky stacks, some Astros, some Mariners as well.
Wow.
But yeah, Cubs, is this the team that you're also getting the most exposure to at the moment, Eric?
At the moment, yes, they're the team I have the most of right now. And then I will be in shambles. Actually, no, I won't be. Depends on what time they would call the game. If it's like 5 minutes before, I'd be in deep shit. But I'd probably just swap to every single. Yeah, I just swap to the latest game possible, and then just bypass my dog and wife for the evening.
There we go. All right, that sounds like a night.
Pretty chill.
Sounds like a night. Single entry. Cubs still the team that you think make the most sense for single entry?
Yes.
Yeah,
right now for sure.
If we didn't have the weather concerns, this team would be very popular.
Wind blowing out in Wrigley. I don't even know what else to say. 6.2 implied run total that nobody's playing, or people are playing at a way lower clip now. Like, again, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how it's going to look right before first pitch, but what it looks like right now as I'm looking at my screen is, hey, Chicago, what do you say? Cubs are going to win today.
Yeah, it is. It's game that right now, like I said, leaving it in, and then I'll reassess as we get a little bit closer to first pitch. But as of right now, guys, the team I have the most exposure to, the Chicago Cubs. The team I'm playing in single entry, the Chicago Cubs. So that is what I'm doing at the moment. That is what the Sims are recommending I do. And the lineup generator is also spitting out a ton of exposure to the Chicago Cubs. Let's go ahead and build some FanDuel lineups and see what we're getting to there, Jordan. And then we'll try to assess some of the rest of the stacks on the slate. We'll answer your guys' questions. We'll do some more run picks, and then we'll be done for the day. Same. Actually, let's go balanced because we did contrarian for DraftKings. Let's see what happens if we go balanced for FanDuel. It might still just give us an overwhelming amount of the Chicago Cubs.
More than likely, yes.
Well, that's where it's starting. Yeah, I've seen nothing but Cubs so far.
Yep.
I think I saw one lineup that didn't have Cubs.
Pretty positive we are all gonna be fucking just broke if this game ends up being
Suzuki, Horner, Bellinger, Morel, Swanson.
Oh yeah,
those are our 5 most rostered.
Yeah.
Jordan, you're gonna give people a seizure watching the show with your mouse movement right there. So our 5 most rostered hitters, not just hitters, 5 most rostered players on FanDuel, all coming from the Chicago Cubs. We are just absolutely loading up on this team. Pitchers that we're getting to on FanDuel: Luis Heel, Imanaga. Again, Imanaga in anything really does scare me today. Because there is a scenario where it starts raining and then it stops and the game could restart, and Imanaga just gets screwed from that standpoint as well. But I mean, either way, Dane Dunning showing up in some lineups here. Don't like Dane Dunning quite that much, although 15% of him isn't all that crazy. Click on the stack exposures, Jordan. Are we getting to anything outside of the Cubs here? Yeah, 90% Cubs.
Oh my God.
Nearly 30% Diamondbacks, 15% Astros, 15% Reds. So yeah, same deal. Just getting a metric ton of the Chicago Cubs. Our data is loving this team. So hopefully this game doesn't end up getting rained out, or at least if it does, we find out in advance prior to lock, where we can make some alterations to our lineups. So let's talk about other stacks today now, Eric. Outside of the Cubs, or let's actually address this another way. If we do get word that the Cubs game is not going to end up playing in advance, What team would you play in single entry instead of the Chicago Cubs?
Ooh, I've got a game plan for it. So this is pretty disturbing, is what it is. But I think getting to Seattle makes the most sense. I've got them as the backup team for it. 4.7 implied run total. Only a 5.5% top stack chance right now, but Luis Heel and Jack Flaherty together, they're pretty expensive. And you look at the top of this lineup up against Mitch Spence. Jury's still out on him. He's been good so far in the big leagues. I don't want to besmirch him by any means, but we get cheap value in JP Crawford, 3,400 leadoff, shortstop, second base, third base, Josh Rojas. Julio Rodriguez now back to batting third, feeling good about that one. Luke Raley there, 3,600. I mean, this is just a team. Mitch Garver, 3K. Dominic Canzone, 2,700. So unbelievably cheap. So as a 5-man, I'm able to throw them together, get to the other pieces that I really want to get to. High Judge and Soto in that lineup currently. I do have Arrighetti in it as it stands right now. I'm toying around with some ideas of what I want to do, but I don't have to sit around and make that decision yet. Mainly Seattle, it's just like a good placeholder lineup to have right now, knowing that in single entry, I'm going to either be playing this Cubs lineup I've set to the side or I'm not. And so I'm happy to have Seattle as like the placeholder where I pivot everything too quick.
So for me, it's going to be the Colorado Rockies. Frankie Montas has been not good this year, and he's pitching in Coors Field tonight as well. It's a Rockies offense that, yeah, we never consider them when they were away from Coors Field. When they're playing in Coors Field, there's always upside there. And we do have the Colorado Rockies with the third highest top stack odds right now. The only team that are higher than them are the Cincinnati Reds, the Chicago Cubs, and this isn't a crazy popular team. 5% projected ownership going to the Colorado Rockies. This is a team that looks like it's under-owned. And if you look at Frankie Montas for the season, he's not generating strikeouts. He's walking guys. His strikeout rate is 15.9% for the season. His walk rate is 8.7%. So his ERA is 4.6. His expected ERA is 4.72, 5.07 FIP. There's nothing that looks positive for Frankie Montas. And now you're going to be putting a guy who's giving up all kinds of contact on the road in Coors Field. I know that Cincinnati is a crazy hitter-friendly park, but maybe the only spot you could put Frankie Montas or be a park downgrade for him would be throwing him into Colorado. There was a chance coming into the year that he would be able to bounce back from the disaster of his time when he was with New York. And I know the narrative was that, hey, he just couldn't handle the pressure of pitching in New York. I'm not sure that was the case. I think what's more likely what happened is it was just a confluence of things. He did end up in a new situation, but I also think he got injured right around that same time. So he was only able to make one start last year. The reason he made one start, it wasn't because he wasn't able to handle the pressure pitching in New York. It was because the guy was simply injured. And I don't know that he's ever going to get back to the form that he was before. And all the numbers look terrible for him. So I like the Rockies against Frankie Montas. That's my single entry pivot if the Cubs game ends up being a no-go.
I get it. He has 4.72 expected ERA. He does not look good by any means. I think for me, it's more of like an evisceration. It's Coors Field. We see bad batters all the time come to fruition, but looking through the lineup, other than Ryan McMahon, there's just nobody in this lineup up against right-handed pitching with north of a 150 expected ISO. I think that's a little bit surprising. I guess it's not because it's Colorado, I suppose, but Charlie Blackmon, 105 expected ISO against righties. Tavar, 131. You've got Diaz, 109. Rogers, 119. Montero, 119. 150 Doyle. He's the one guy that is up there. There's not like a lot of power move the line upside here. It is Coors Field, so I guess that kind of negates it a little bit. There's a reason that they're the third highest top stack potential, but at the same time, can they really take advantage of Frankie Montas here? I think Ryan McMahon surely can, but for me, I'm just looking to the latest game, and then I can kind of make later decisions if need be. But just have a placeholder intact, everybody, so that if that news does come down, you can just fire up the exact lineup that you want. Have it set to the side. You know, if you need like reserve like a couple of $1 lineups, a couple of $3 lineups, whatever it is, so that you can know what that lineup is. Just have it set to the side.
Here's the other part of the Coors Field game that I want to ask about. I've already said I like the Rockies, not a team that's picking up all that much ownership. The Reds are. The Reds are expected to be very popular today. We have them as the second most popular offense on the slate. Actually, the San Francisco Giants picking up even more ownership than the Reds. I'll refresh that to make sure that is still the case. But on our last run, yeah, it is. Nearly 11% ownership going to the Giants, just over 10% ownership going to the Reds. So it looks like the chalk in single entry is going to be the Giants and the Reds for today. What are you going to do with Cincinnati? Is it a team that you like for single entry? I know we've already identified other stacks that we like more. Do you like them for large field tournaments? How are you going to handle the Cincinnati Reds, who are at the top of our board in our top stacks? Do we have them with a 14.7% chance being the top scoring team? The only team remotely close to them, the Cubs at 10.9%. Every other team is sub 8%. Reds, 14.7% top stack odds, 10.4% expected ownership. How are you handling them in large field tournaments?
I don't know yet. It will completely depend on the Cubs. If the Cubs game starts clean, I'm going to have way more Cubs than Cincinnati. I think that's something to probably take note of, is just seeing how much in the Sims tool that everybody's going to be getting to Cincinnati here to the Cubs here at this point in time. I think just global swap and getting to as much Cincinnati as possible, I think, is also a pretty good default, as opposed to just getting to the latest game on the slate like I was Seattle. But if the Cubs game starts, I'm just going to have way more of that. I think there's enough uncertainty. There's enough. I mean, I don't have a lot of confidence in it. I'm sure that that's kind of the case everywhere else. But if you're risk averse, you go ahead and stay away. I am going to embrace it. So I think Cincinnati's obviously the top stack for a reason. They're a phenomenal spot. Ty Blach is Blach. He's terrible. So take advantage if you really want to just jam that spot. But I'm going to prefer the Cubs spot.
I like how you pronounce his last name like he was a Dagestani fighter in the UFC there. Ty Blach.
Yeah, it's so, that, but it's more of like a kid eating peas, like blach, like a little bit more of that.
So the Reds are the team that I have the second most exposure to in large field tournaments right now. I don't want to play them in single entry. Even if I take the Cubs off the table, I think this Reds team is just going to be way too popular in single entry for me to want to go there. But for large field tournaments, yeah, they look underowned in our top stacks tool because of the metrics that I just pointed out before. So I right now only have north of 10% exposure to two offenses in large field tournaments. It's the Cubs, it's the Reds. Just those two teams that I have more than 10% exposure to, and then some other teams that are mixed in here as well. So any contrarian teams you're liking today, Eric? Any really, really low-owned teams that we should highlight for the people before we do our home run picks?
The White Sox. It's weird to look at the Cubs as such a better spot than the White Sox in the same exact game environment. And I think that at least needs to be said. Shodi Minaga, he's still relatively new. And the thing he does have is an 18.6-degree average launch angle with a 40% hard hit. If you bring this into these game conditions with a neutral baseball team, they absolutely smash him. Like I would be stacking up a ton of the other team against Imanaga. Just so happens it's the White Sox. But Corey Julks, Luis Robert, we've got Paul DeYoung. I think 1 through 4 especially, and then throwing in Corey Lee, who I don't completely hate. I think 7 through 9, it is gross. Martin Maldonado, bet his under 0.5 hits like every single day. It's like one of the first things I do when I see him in a lineup. Lennon Sosa is not very good either, although 42% hard hit. He's basically just a slapper up there. But 1 through 4 specifically, don't completely hate left-on-left Gavin Sheets, but I think the White Sox are a very, very, very interesting contrarian team today.
They're only 1% owned. I have 4% of them, so I'm 4x the field. If you have 20 lineups and you play one White Sox stack, you're way overweight to the field. It is a good hitting environment. Imanaga has been very good this year, but obviously has been a little bit lucky too, if you look at the underlying stats. So going forward, and this is also one of the reasons why I've been high on Yamamoto to win Rookie of the Year at long odds. I don't think that Imanaga has been any real significantly better than Yamamoto. He's just gotten a little bit of better luck. So Imanaga has been great, but still, you're looking at a guy who has relative to a 1.86 ERA, a 2.99 expected ERA, and then also all projection models the rest of the season have him regressing quite a bit. The Bat has his ERA for the rest of the year at 4.24. Steamer has it at 3.72. Depth chart has it at 3.61. So it looks like going forward, most projection models are looking at him as like a league average to slightly above league average pitcher. So he's been great so far this year, but I am expecting some regression for Imanaga. So I don't mind the White Sox at just 1% projected ownership. The Braves, I continually get to the Braves a little bit in the Sims tool. This is an offense, it's so much more talented than what they've shown over the course of the last month. So if we're going to keep getting the Braves at 4 or 5% ownership, I'm going to land at like 6, 7, 8% of them on a lot of slates. So not a massive investment, but I am a little bit overweight to the field on them. And one super chat that I want to shout out to. Apologies because I missed this earlier in the show, but Andre B says he took down the 50K rally on FanDuel last night, split it with one other guy. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go. I just said, let's go.
Let's go. Let's go, Andre B. So took down the 50K rally, split with one other person. Just want to thank us for the information on the daily. He says the Ehrenberg and Lindquist is his favorite DFS law firm. Ehrenberg and Lindquist. I don't know. That would be a great sounding law firm because
it doesn't roll off the tongue. We roll off each other's tongues, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's got to be a little bit more. It's got to be like Ehrenberg and Steinberg, something that has like a little more Jewish sounding names to it. Ehrenberg and Lindquist doesn't quite do it.
Yeah, it just sounds like, oh, why did he pair up? Why did the Jewish guy pair up with this idiot? I don't know. I'm sure people probably say that all the time anyway.
Yeah, they do. They do. But very much a shout out to Andre B. Love to see that you took down a GPP. And for everybody else who's ever looking for more information on the channel, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Watch our content on the daily. Watch it on playback. We're hanging out over there. We appreciate that a whole bunch. Any other offenses that you want to highlight here, Eric? If not, we'll do our home run picks before checking out for the night.
Yeah, we got to at least talk about these Padres. Fuck those guys. Absolute morons. We get the Machado home run and then just watch absolute nothingness against Tyler Anderson. Whatever. I'll run it out against Patrick Sandoval. I'll do a couple of shares. I'm going to fire them up here. Houston against Palante. Palante and Arrighetti. That's a lot of syllables and vowels and things going on there in those pitchers. But Houston, they're pulling a little bit more ownership. So I'm more inclined to just get to the normal guys that everybody else is going to roster to in that spot. But looking through it, I'm, a couple of percent here or there. I wish I could get to as many Yankees as possible, but they are expensive. And I'm definitely going to be leaning on the heel side of things at 10-8, getting to some of these other offenses. Seattle, though, that's the one offense that talked about for single entry. Really like them for tournaments here today, too. Super cheap, allow for me to get to as much heel as I humanly want.
Final question then. Eric, dong of the day. Who's going yard today? What's the home run pick of the day? And chat, feel free to participate as well. Throw it into the chat. Let us know who it is that you guys are picking a homer today, and I'll read off some of your answers. Who's your dong pick, Eric?
So, I mean, obviously I have the White Sox side of it too, but I guess this is kind of a fun bet because we have like an hour window and you're throwing it out there. I bet plus 320 Seiya Suzuki. How about we go first at bat, Seiya Suzuki? I think that this could be like, or first homer of the game, Seiya Suzuki. I think both of those are kind of intriguing to me. The guy has a 17-degree launch angle with a 53% hard hit that leads this team. He missed a little bit of time this season. He does strike out a lot, but a 26% K rate on the season. It's beautiful when he faces a guy like Chris Flexen who has no swing and miss stuff, 18% K rate, only a 7.7% barrel percentage. Expected that to be a little bit higher, but just 21% whiff percentage on his portfolio in the season. Looking at my dude Suzuki at hitting a bomb in that first inning.
Same game, different player. I'm going with Chris Morel. He is the hitter I have the most exposure to right now. Suzuki is second, though. So Morel, Suzuki, also not a combination you'd expect to be hearing in a law firm, Morel, Suzuki, but all good. I'm picking Chris Morel. I'm picking Chris Morel. You got Seiya Suzuki. What do we have from chat here? We have Malukar is going with a Justin Henry Malloy home run. Everybody's just going to be going with anything that sounds like a law firm now in chat, apparently. Michael Roundtree is going with Jorge Soler. Sotex has got Julio Rodriguez. Francisco Rubio is going with Gunnar Henderson. Mr. Big's going with Aaron Judge. Yeah, you can really never go wrong picking Aaron Judge. He's probably like plus 150 to homer. I didn't even look at what his sportsbook odds are, but I'm sure it's something crazy short. We've also got Steven Leibowitz going with Fernando Tatis. Clintwood 83 is going with Adolis Garcia. Cosmo's got Jordan Westberg. Walton Horton's going with Jerickson Profar. Ken Rowdy also has got Jerickson Profar. We've got John B going with Matt Olson. Steve Sand going with Gunnar Henderson. Gunnar Henderson, I think, has been picked more to homer today than anybody else in chat for the entire year. And yeah, it's looked pretty good. He's right towards the top of.
You lost it for me, Gunnar. You lost it for yourself.
People love great baseball name too. Gunnar Henderson.
Good.
Casey Leatherwood going with 2 home run picks, Rizzo and Matt Olson. And then we've also got Jenna Sandy's got Ryan Mountcastle. Then Doug Dubs is going Juan Soto. So some of the home run picks from chat there, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're looking for more information and updates for tonight when it comes to the rain or anything else that might happen, if you're signed up for Stochastic Sub, come hang out with us in Discord. There's going to be updates in there. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Good luck. Let's avoid the raindrops and see you back here tomorrow. Peace out.